Hello, everyone. My name is Balkrishna, and I'm your host and moderator for today's session. I welcome you all for this interesting and enlightening session, which will empower you to get some additional inputs from our expert come guest of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me an immense pleasure to introduce our today's guest, Mr. Mridul Nagpal. Sir is proud alumnus of batch 2004 and 6 of Indus Business School IIEBM and actively contributing towards the betterment of students of our alma mater. Sir is currently working with Danfoss India as Head Distribution Sales Pan India. In his prior role with Eaton Hydraulics, he was responsible for marketing, sales operation, and excellence. Sir is an avid traveler, reader, and love interacting with people. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our guest.
Good evening, Bali and everybody. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. So it's been busy, but nice to be back and talking to everybody once again. Some of the names I already know that I saw on the chat window, so maybe they already have my introduction with them. But nice to be back. I hope what we speak over the next 20-25 minutes helps them. We'll keep it short and brief on the some of the glimpses that we might share on the union budget of fiscal 23.
Right, sir. So my first question is, then you can take over. My first question is, why do we need budget? How it is relevant? How it empowers the GDP or the economy of the company?
Yeah.
The country.
Yeah, no, valid question to begin the question, and I'm sure it's going to set the tone for the next 20 minutes, followed by Q&A. So, budget is it's like any profit and loss account statement for an organization. So, budget is for the economy, it's for the country. It's like in a layman, if we have to talk, why do we need a budget? Would you be okay playing a game without a rule or without rules, right? So we need rules to be part of the game and enjoy the game and play in the guidelines of the game. Or another example, if I could take, is can you construct a building without a blueprint? Maybe you will be able to, but it may or may not have its significance. That's essential to construct a building. So it kind of gives us a guideline or a roadmap to operate in, number one. Number two, as I said, it's important to check on the performance of the country or the economy. And of course, I should know that what we budgeted last year, did I stand strong on those commitments that I made to the economy or the country, and what's my plan of action for the coming year or the coming years rather. So this budget taught us a little about coming years as well. So this budget is not just for the coming year. So people say that the union budget fiscal year 23 that is announced on 1st February 2022 lays the foundation for the next 20-25 years for India. So I hope that answers your first question, why it is significant to have one.
Yes, sir. Certainly, it has actually set the premise for the session. Now you can take over, sir. Do you want me to run the slides for you?
I've got few slides, very crisp. More than happy to receive a lot of questions on the chat window so that we can answer in parallel. I know it's more like a live session and not a Microsoft Teams interactive session, but then leverage the chat window that's there and ask me questions. And I know some of you have already heard me talking about budget maybe last year, and just in case it has helped you improve and you've already gone through the budget, do share your comments on that as well, so that it tells me that whether when I articulate budget from my perspective, does it really add value? So slides are just one parameter of some reference to everybody. Sometimes people are not able to catch up to the speed that I talk, so slides are essential for me. Yes, so if you just look at the first slide that I've prepared, it talks about so what are the key financials that we not this one, Bali. Just move to the next one. Yeah, next one. Yes. So if you look at some of the financials for the coming year, we see that the total revenue that the government is expecting out of the expenditure that they do in the year is about 22.8 lakh crores, let's say about 23 lakh crores, which is actually up by about 5% from last year. Now, what revenue means? It means the income that the government is likely to do in the coming year. I did not highlight in particular, but if you look at the bar chart on the right-hand side on revenue receipts, you see the orange bar, right? So that talks about the current year, which is going to end in March. So that's also 21.8, let's say about 22, right? So we're talking about additional 1 lakh crore of revenue coming in from the following year. As I said in the beginning of the, in the beginning, that did we achieve what we communicated last? Did we hold accountability of delivering what we communicated last? So I was reading the scripts from Honorable Finance Minister, and it made me understand that 21.8 lakh crores that we are likely to complete this March is 10% higher than the budgeted number. So that's commendable. And the year 21 gone by was a very speedy, highly engaging, busy, and money-making year for many. I know many were struggling as well because of business, but then it was a money-making year for many in the industry, especially the airlines, manufacturing, pharma, healthcare, athletics, sports. They made significant amount of money. So industries that did not make money was largely, let's say, hospitality, or various services that needed attention and business, and a lot of people got involved. So they got impacted, but then overall it was still 10% higher than the budget that was communicated last year, February. So that's a good thing. And this year they're saying that it's going to be about 22.8, let's say 23 lakh crore, which is 4.8% likely to be better year over year. All right, so that's a good news. Moving on to the next one, which talks about the total expenditure, which is further bifurcated into revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. So revenue expenditure is about 32 lakh crore out of the total 39 lakh crore that you see here, right? So which is 80%, maybe more, of the total expenditure. So revenue expenditure is the expenses that I need to do to make that money. And you can clearly see that the revenue expenditure is much higher than the revenues that we are likely to generate, right? So there's a catch there, number one. And number two, if you look at the capital expenditure, that's about 7.5 lakh crore, which is about 25% up year over year. So what is capital expenditure? So capital expenditure does certainly talks about some of the infrastructure investments that we do in the country. For example, setting up a solar plant, or maybe setting up a nuclear power plant, right? Setting up a special infrastructure, for example, building a tunnel for business perspective. And very importantly, which is also a very important number between capital expenditure, is the money that the government lends to other states. For example, if there is a flood, or there is a natural calamity that we keep hearing sometimes happen in Kerala, Uttarakhand, floods in Chennai, Jharkhand, etc. So any money that the government lends because of some other reason, these are just few that I mentioned, but there could be several other reasons. For example, Maharashtra government needed a lot of money to have the right vaccination drive in Maharashtra. So when they lend out that money, so that's also part of the expenditure that the government incurs, right? So you can clearly see from the top two that against the expenditure, the revenue is quite comparatively lesser. And if you look at the bottom chart on the right hand side, the capital expenditure or the total expenditure continues to rise. In the year 2020, it was about 35 lakh crores, and now it has gone to 39.4 lakh crores, right? So each year the expenditures are likely to grow. So this makes me come down to a conclusion that once again, the Indian government has delivered a deficit budget, which will have its own growth, revenue generation opportunities in the years to come. It was there in the media that the budget is not laid out for the current year. It's being laid out for the next 20 or 25 years. There are a lot of investments. These are large investments when it comes to ease of doing business in India, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to logistics, when it comes to infrastructure building. Huge corpus is being invested, which you can clearly see it's there in the revenue and the capital expenditure. You want to understand the definition of revenue and capital expenditure even more in detail, follow Wikipedia, go Google and try and drill down further on what exactly does it mean. But I just shared high level, that should be okay for the current session. Right. And the GDP forecast, which is of course the indicator of, or the thermometer of any economy performance, right? So it's expected to be about 11%, but this is the nominal GDP, which includes the inflation. So inflation in our country has generally been around 6%, sometimes 5%, but then the last 2 years have been maybe even 7-8%. So I'm expecting the GDP for next year can be forecasted at about 6%, which I think is a reasonably fair GDP growth. And it's going to be higher than maybe any of the European countries or American countries, right? So America. Some of the Asian countries might report double digit because their base is generally small, but India GDP at about 6-7%, anywhere closer to that is quite phenomenal. Looking at the debt that we are running into right now. So during the last 2 years, we had experienced a debt of about 9.5% of the total GDP, which is twice the size of any normal condition. Usually people say that a 3% or a 4% debt is welcoming, and that remains, So, but in our case, the pandemic had its own impact, and our debt rose to about 9.5%, which we now see currently at about 6.9%, and the government is forecasting that to go to about 6.4% and reducing it to 4.5% in the years to come, which is quite far. But let's see. I think the debt portion of any country or any economy right now has gone much, much higher.
Right.
So last year there was a big announcement in the budget, and this year we didn't hear much about the divestitures that the government wanted to do in public sector units. For example, selling our stakes in LIC or any bank for that matter, or maybe the airlines that they divested, right? So 75,000 crores worth of divestitures took place last year, as against the much bigger number that the government committed. And looking at the pace of divestments, it appears maybe another 65,000 crore worth of divestments might take place in the year to come. But looks like the performance on the last year's budget has been reasonably good. I have a slide that talks about the GDP performance in the following slides, and the recovery that happened because post the lockdowns, and then there was another wave that happened a few months ago, and that kind of impacted the GDP again. You will be able to see it in the slides to come.
Okay.
All right.
Shall I go ahead with the next slide?
In case you want to go to the last slide, we go to the last slide first, and which is the GDP slide. Just scroll down further. Yeah. So this is the state of the no, the previous one.
Sorry.
No
Yep.
problem. So this is the state of the economy right now. So we all know what happened in April, June. The first red bar that you see, which has minus 22.3% drop, and then it kind of recovered. Everybody knew it. And then you see again in July, September, the last year, the economy started to sink in further. And this quarter, which is the Jan February forecast, which is the last red bar that I've plotted, we're forecasting about 6%. But if you look at the year's economy, the GDP, I think we'd be closing at about 8% or 8.5%.
Mm-hmm.
Which is quite a number looking at the busy year that we had 2021. However, the start for 2022 looks not little, it's relatively slower. It could be the cases, it could be the supply chain constraints, it could be the nervousness that people have to go out and spend money and etc. But talking from the budget perspective purely, what they communicated and what you see in the chart here on the GDP performance, it tells us that the money that was announced in stimulus or the budget can be easily seen in the GDP growth that you see from October, December to July, September period, which is the white patch in the middle.
Right.
So this talks a lot about the actual performance of the fiscal year 22 budget, which was last year's budget. Now, what we'll actually see in 23 is it's going to be challenging in its own way. But again, the budget that's announced is not announced only for 23. I've been saying this again and again. So it's announced for the following years, and we might not see a significant number coming in 22 and 23, but eventually in the years to come, it will be a bigger number. Yeah. So we go back to the second slide, which is the budget allocation.
Okay, the next one. This one.
Yeah. So, excuse me. Now, this slide is very important, and we should spend a little extra time here. So where did the 39 lakh crore the number that you saw in the previous slide, how does it breaks down to ministries? So who takes how much of the share? Who's busy, right? So you see the third column in the table, it totals to 39.4 lakh crores, which is exactly the same number mentioned in the previous slide. Column one talks the various ministries that we have, and then what we actually achieved and how we spent our money in 2020, 2021, and the following year, which is 21, 22, basically the 2 COVID years. And then what are we forecasting in the year to come? And how have we actually performed year over year? So that's kind of the percentage growth or the degrowth. You can clearly see that there is a significant drop in the budget allocation done in the food and public distribution. Number one, degrowth, and chemicals and fertilizers, isn't it? And the third one is the rural development, which we will talk. But first are these two, which have seen significant, let's say 28% and 25% or 24% respectively, right? The drop in budget. So does that raise the eyebrows of, why when we are increasing our total expenditure to 39 lakh crores, why are we dropping 24 and 28% respectively in food and public distribution and chemicals and fertilizer? It's very logical, right? People, if you have any perspective on why these two ministries have seen a drop, please post it on the chat window. We'll be more than happy to see your perspective and hear your perspective as well. Before I actually disclose why there's a drop.
So students, I request you all to please share your thoughts on the question which sir has asked. Yes, sir. Please continue.
All right.
Yeah.
So people are thinking maybe.
Maybe they are thinking, yes.
Yeah. So you can clearly see, if you talk about food and public distribution, the first drop that we have, right? In that's the reason I've color coded. I put conditional formatting so that the color is different. Food and public distribution sees a drop. First of all, we're doing a comparison with the prior year. Here, it's dropped from 3 lakh crores to 2.2 lakh crores. If people have to follow the number, you'll have to probably tell them where the cursor, where we are right now. Yeah. So it has dropped from 5.7 lakh crores to 3 lakh crores to 2.2 lakh crores.
Let me just use the marker and then we can show that. Yeah. So is it visible?
Yes, it's coming. Yeah. So you can clearly see the numbers are dropping from 5.7 to 3 to 2.2. The bigger question is that why do we have 5.7 in the year 2020 and 21? Because that was the pandemic year. There was a lot of food, shelter, medicine distribution that happened across the country by the government. And that's how this number went up significantly, which was not there in the budget. Because nobody anticipated pandemic, right? The budget was announced on 1st of February 2020 and the lockdown happened in March, correct? If you recall what happened 2 years down the line. 2 years ago, sorry. So that year was a phenomenal year, and that's why it needed that level of attention and budget allocation, which probably is not required this year. We are in a lot better situation than what we were 2 years ago, right? So though we see a decline to 28.6, Bali, there is faded in this screen and it says transparency slider. If you can just do escape or something.
Just a moment.
So we see 28.6% drop. However, the base number 5.7 was too high and there was a reason behind it. It was high. So the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana was into play in the year 2020, which attempts to provide free food grains to migrating workforce or the population that cannot afford to survive of their own. And of course, the reason being pandemic.
Right.
So that's the reason. So the base was too high and that's why the percentage appears also higher in a negative perspective. So why chemicals and fertilizers see a dip of 24%? However, the number is only 1.3, 1.4 and 1.1. It's still over a lakh crore, right? That's quite an amount of money. But we still see a drop of, let's say, 24% year over year. Why is that so? Again.
Students, please respond. We are still waiting for the answers of the first question. There is no response.
So the reason the budget was higher in the year 2020 and 21 for fertilizer and chemical, because during the lockdown or maybe post the lockdown, the commodity prices had gone up so high that the international prices of raw materials had gone up significantly when it comes to chemicals and fertilizers. So the government had to come in, provide some subsidies and continue the operations. So this was in response to a sharp increase in international prices of raw materials used in the manufacturing of fertilizers. And similarly, I don't know if so the union budget doesn't very categorically talk about what happened to petroleum.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the ministries here, according to me, the petroleum should also be part of chemicals and fertilizers, according to me. Because defense is different, food and public is different, road transportation doesn't have petroleum, home affairs, railways, they're very, very specific ministries, right? Agriculture is also very specific. Communication, education is also very specific. Health, Jal Shakti, and then housing.
Usually that comes under energy and renewable and non-renewable resources.
So maybe either that has gone to the others category,
right?
Or maybe it is part of. But it appears to me, I had a confusion here, but it appears to me because chemical and fertilizer budget is also very, very low. So probably petroleum is somewhere else. But then petroleum also got impacted. I'll tell you how, because with this climate change promises that the country has been doing to reduce carbon emission, etc., and come up with electric vehicles and whatnot, the subsidy was withdrawn from LPG and kerosene,
Okay.
which has declined by about 11% year over year, and maybe 10,000 crores, 15,000 crores were also allocated, which has dropped by 10-15% there. So that's one area which has got impacted significantly. So when I say chemicals and fertilizers back again, so the reason we had higher allocation in the year 21 for chemical and fertilizers was the sharp increase in international prices of raw materials that we consume to manufacture fertilizers in India. So that was the reason. Maybe today the commodity levels are kind of coming to the earlier standards, and that's how the budget is, allocation has done a little relatively lesser. So, but these are the two areas largely which has seen a high double-digit drop off to the tune of 28% and 24%. The third one is the rural development, and it actually raised a lot of eyebrows. Here, rural में ऊपर वाला. So why rural had to see a dip from 2 lakh crores to maybe 1.4 lakh crores this year, in terms of allocation? We want electricity, water, and whatnot facilities to go to rural development, right? So
Yes.
Isn't it? So so while I was reading, I also got to learn this time that people will have to put their perspective on the chats. And unfortunately, this is not an interactive session, but this slide is actually the meat of the budget, right? So rural development has this very, very important element, which is called as Manrega.
Yes, which was started by the previous government.
And this was started in the year 2005. I came to Manrega, but what I know is that any Lok Sabha session that I hear on YouTube or in on television, I see the current government criticize or do talk about Manrega.
Yes.
There are some reasons. Maybe they are bleeding because of the budget or the past work that's done, and it appears to be a concern. So what is Manrega? So Manrega was a scheme that was launched in the year 2005, and how you acronym the short form is, it's Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Development Governance Act. That's how you acronym the terminology called Manrega. Yes. As I said, it was there in 2005, since 2005, and it was there for two major reasons. One, the largest umbrella is rural development.
Right.
All right. Two reasons. One is 100 days of wage commitments to underprivileged men of the families, number one. Number two, 1/3 of the total jobs are allocated to women in the rural economy.
Right.
These were the two major factors of establishing Manrega. Why would this be done? So basically, this was done to provide a shield or a cushion or a comfort net to those category of people in our country who are in a way underprivileged to make their own earnings.
Right.
That's why you have Manrega in the process.
Yes.
It's been 16 years it existed. The current government has been in force for the last 8 years now, maybe.
Right.
2014 only, 14, right? It started.
Yes, so 2014.
Yeah, so 6 plus 7, 8 years now. And it appears there are some concerns around it. So while I was reading a lot of articles, I this is my perspective, and this is purely my perspective, right? So could be right and half right, or it is not clearly mentioned that why the budget allocation for rural development declined specifically for the coming year, and for the prior year also it has declined. But what we understand is that there are few new schemes that have been launched.
Right.
I'll talk about those schemes in next 30 seconds, but what it appears at the nutshell is that no direct money to be given to a lot of people across India, rather generate employment by launching these schemes. Now, let me just briefly tell you. So, what are these schemes which are announced in the form of Amrit Kal for farmers, in particular? One of them being the Jal Jeevan Mission. A lot of money has been allocated. Let's say I have a number in front of me that says about 15,000 crores. The second biggest scheme that was announced was the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchan Yojana. And of course, the Swachh Bharat mission also continues in that, and there's a lot of money that's announced. That's about 8,000 crores. There is another scheme that's announced this time, which is Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana. So what this scheme, they've elaborated a little extra here. So basically what it means is the stock that the farmers generate after cultivation, after the crop is matured or produced and harvested. So farmers and the mandis in respective geographies, they create livestocks, right? So in order to take care of the health and control the diseases that those crops might attract, so government has come up with urea subsidies and insurance programs, funds allocation, etc. under the Sampada Yojana scheme for a lot of farmers in India.
Right.
There's another one which is very interesting, and I was never heard about it before, to be honest with you. I'll just let you know. This one is around here. Yeah. So this one is also part of the Kisan Sampada Yojana. It says that they're going to be boosting rural development through acceleration of delivering digital or maybe high-tech services to farmers. For example, educating them of the right farming parameters or standards or processes. It also says use of drones for crop assessments.
Right.
Chemical-free natural farming and building up a corridor across the Ganga plains for natural farming. E-Vidya classes to farmers, and onboarding of all post offices in the bank systems. Delivering of optical fibers to rural areas. So this is the high-tech digital transformation project that they've taken this time. But however, they've not announced the budget allocation for this. But it appears very, very promising, rather. Now, on a practical ground, I don't know if our farmer need a e-Vidya or a drone services for crop assessments. Maybe optical fibers are needed for better communication, intranet services, data management, etc. But is the farmer prepared? We don't know. Do they really perceive it
that way?
We don't know. So that's why I think it was easier for the current budget to be called as a futuristic budget for the next 20 years. So it's kind of laid the foundation, and that's how it was announced. And it was announced also in that same body language. So the body language that you demonstrate in announcing some things, futuristic plans also communicate a lot. So I think that's what it communicated.
Right.
These are some of those new schemes that have been announced. However, the budget allocation is not to the tunes of 2 lakh crores that we see 2 years ago. So there is a dip of, let's say, from 2 to 1.4 lakh crores, about 600,000 lakh crores, whatever.
Right. Right.
But it is what it is. Uh, what I also understood was that there could be another farmer protest. It did not happen though, which is good.
Yeah.
But it appears that people did not take it very, very favorably. But if you look at agriculture and farm welfare, they haven't reduced that number. It's consistent at about 4.85% growth in budget every year. So that also is a huge amount.
Right.
So rural development ko unhone thoda sa is bari, they've given a different angle to it, and they've linked into futuristic approach towards rural development. So I think we should watch for this space in the times to come and see how this matures. So honestly, if you ask me, I spoke about rural development at the end of this slide, but this was the most interesting piece of the entire ministries.
Right.
Everybody got money, right? So 4.7% net increase on your total expenditures, isn't it? So
Right.
everybody, look at road transportation and highways, 50% jump, right? So approximately. So railways, 16%. We've seen a lot of development already in railways that connects each one of us, right? So again, communications, a lot of amount is spent on communications, right? So I think all of the ministries should be very happy about it. They've got some budgets to play around for the next year. They're going to be very, very busy, barring couple of that has global compliance issues or need. So according to me, it's a very pragmatic budget being laid out. And so how are people reacting to this budget now? That's the biggest big one, right? So so if you look at the next one, and one thing that I clearly see, the biggest barometer for any performance in India, of course, GDP is one, but GDP is longer term. It's our stock exchanges, right? So they immediately tell us how people have perceived it. So here you can clearly see that we were kind of seeing a dip in stock exchange the entire January. But then as the budget was announced, you will see a little pyramid going up in the month of February or end of January. And then eventually taking its own nat in the times to come. I think cryptocurrency also has some impact there. Then GDP numbers also sometimes become a reason for worry. So as I said, the GDP numbers that came for Q3, which was October, November, December, that came out, they were lesser. But if you look at those 2 days, which shows that steep incline.
Yes.
So it was, nutshell, it was perceived in a very futuristic, growth-oriented budget. And I did not put it on a slide this time, but the last 4 budgets that our honorable finance minister has announced, there's never been a time where Sensex has shown a degrowth.
Right. There is always an uptrend in the market whenever the budget is coming.
Budget is announced. So especially in the last 3 years or 4 years rather. Otherwise, it has never tanked also, but then it has its own momentum during the day and the next 2 days, something like that.
Same kind of trends are there with the elections also, sir, these days. Whenever there are elections around the corner, there's always an uptrend in the stock exchange. Yeah, please go ahead.
So as I said, so it's very interesting to read and understand what happened, what they said last year and what they actually did. You see the GDP numbers in the following slides, and then so when they announced it this time, you immediately see it on. So it's about how you manipulate it or how you really perceive it. How do you judge it? Is very, very important. So people have criticized, people have appreciated, applauded. So they see. So why they did for 25 years next? Because so when India is 100 years independence, that's how they wanted to connect. So they're saying that we have a journey next 25 years. So which is so that way it appears good. So Wali, that's all I wanted to share over some slide. I did not talk about what happened to the taxations. I think that those are plain reads that can be done on the internet. Union
Right.
Budget 23, first link you get is the brief of 7 pages, which is the summary. But how whatsoever, no tax slab changes in the income tax of salaried class. Some relief here and there to higher incomes and long-term savings, long-term tax gains, etc. So, but I picked up the the important and the relevant one. Yeah.
Right.
So that's all from my side. Yeah, when it comes to
Right, sir. I can see some of the responses. Mr. Vishwarath has written, we were talking of Manrega, is given the correct acronym. It is Mahatma
yeah,
Gandhi National Rural
yeah.
Employment.
Vishwarath knows it. I've
Yeah.
heard him on this subject. He enjoys talking on this particular subject. I've
Yes.
seen that in the class.
And there's one more. Mr. Mishra writes, Sir, development of rural areas nowadays more inclined towards communication, education, health. So maybe this is one reason of decrement in rural development budget. As all these aspects cover in other sectors,
Other sectors. Yeah.
so maybe that's why there is decrement in.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's not a significant decrement. It's about 10%. It's about prioritization. It's about the money that you have in your pocket, and you decide where to spend it. And of course, they keep changing the definition of the ministries. So, but yeah, I agree that
right.
the focus is shifting with various ministries. Yeah.
Yes. So let's open the house for the questions also. Students, please post your questions if you have, and let's hear from your side also. Sir, meanwhile they are posting the question, I also have a few questions with me. Uh, can you elaborate on this thing, that this budget, how it is, uh, whether it is empowering the industry or whether it is not empowering the industry,
Okay.
specifically the Indian market. If we say, we were also speculating, and the government is also having this vision of making India as a manufacturing hub. So, how you see this,
Uh,
your perspective?
no, very valid. Does the businessman or the service or the new aspirant or the new startup, uh, do they really feel empowered to be able to do a successful business in India? So good thing is that over the last few years, ease of doing business in India has substantially paid a lot of attention to. While I also agree that people sitting outside India doing investments in India, they have their own concerns, and Tesla is a classic example.
Right.
However, just because you've thrown a light on how to do business in India, I think that's enough for us to know the government has started paying a lot of attention to it. That it's important that we start paying attention to investments in India, especially when it's come to investing by our own set of people, all Indians only. Yes, the empowerment can be definitely seen. The second point that you raised was on the Make in India, right? It's a long laid out project. I've been hearing for about maybe 4, 5, or maybe more years. The import content. So we do a lot of imports
Right.
across the world, right? Interesting would be to look at that data. Has the import content in India reduced year over year? And you will find the answer is yes. I'm hopeful. I don't know if you recall, Bali, but I think few months ago when Tata, Ashok Leyland, Mahindra cars were produced without the semiconductors in the vehicles.
Yes, there was a shortage of semiconductors, and still the industry
It
is facing
continues, right? I think the ministry had immediately come up with a plan of manufacturing it in India.
Yes, and
There
that's
was
why there was a uptrends in the the companies which are making semiconductors.
making semiconductors. Absolutely. That's one example. Second example is pharmaceutical. India has always had an edge on pharmaceuticals, right?
Yes.
So vaccine is a feather in the cap. How it has saved India and probably some of the neighboring countries and maybe some of the world. While the other nations continue to struggle. I was talking to the to set of students in January, and where I talked about how the supply chain constraints are impacting the India businesses. There are shortages for imports still. Europe is still recovering.
Right.
US is still recovering. They are not able to cope up to the supply requirements. I think India as a nation has done relatively much better when it comes to fulfilling the desires and the requirements. So we're still not normal. It's going to take some time to be normal. So Make in India is going to be maturing. It will continue to mature. I am very optimistic about it. And my manufacturing set of people in Danfoss, my supply chain talks about localization every day.
Right.
कि यार इसको यहाँ बना सकते हैं क्या? So you see it on ground, right?
Right, sir. So
you
sir,
see
one question attached to this. These initiatives which you're talking about, where your factory is also talking about localization or getting the product sourced from the local market rather than getting it imported from the overseas. Is that the policy being followed by the parent company, or is that the mandate which has been given by the government?
It's a dual impact. So when you increase the customs duty on the imports, you're bound to.
Yeah. So just to
the consumer is not going to pay that, right? So
right. So make it more profitable. That is the only option.
You pay customs duty, get a car which is imported, pay customs duty, and own it. The company is going to pass on it to the end consumer, right? But will you be able to sustain that price in the market? Is the question. So that's how you go back calculations. Okay, if I import it, I pay 30%, 35% customs duty rather than buy an India make. Right. So people are not encouraging if it's written made in China. People are not encouraging that. Not just China, it could be others also. Made in India, it's kind of a brand in itself now.
Right.
At least it has caught my attention and my friends' attention of any product that we buy. Is it really made in India? We've got that awareness.
Right.
Over the last few years, if you ask me. So the end consumer is also doing that. Let me tell you, in my space, many products that we do for the Indian government through our channel partners or through our distribution network, the appeal comes is the product has to be made in India.
Right.
So kahin se this noise has started to pinch in.
Got it. So there are a few questions from the student side also. Mr. Mishra asks, sir, what do you think about announcement made by government on defense sector? He has one more question, but if you can just answer this one, and then I'll ask the next question. So he is asking for your perspective on announcement on defense sector.
So defense prioritization will continue to be higher. There's no questions on that. And at the ground level, I do see a lot of projects being initiated by the DRDO or various research and development organizations that support Indian Army, Indian Navy, etc. The allocation for defense had gone up by 5%, and it's increasing year over year. So it's going to be focused. We want to be, again, the word comes Atmanirbhar. So a lot of imports, again, from Russia, France, Italy, etc., which the defense ministry is now focusing on doing it in India. So budget allocation, several new projects, few projects I am myself working on with my team for supplying hydraulics on some of the defense projects in India. And they've never done this before. So, there are these something called as recovery vehicles that are used during war times.
So the similar kind of a vehicle which we have here in campus.
One of the types. Recovery vehicles is somebody getting hurt during the war. So there is a treatment that can be done in that recovery vehicle and other features also. So it has a whole lot of hydraulics on it, and so there are few inquiries that we keep receiving. So supplying hydraulics for the machines that were never made in India before. So new developments, new technology. There are a few projects that I'm aware of, but I cannot disclose it because I've signed a NDA, non-disclosure agreement with the customer. Yeah. So you can see momentum, gained over the past few years. But then if you want to read more about the defense specific projects, I'm not sure if a lot will be disclosed on internet also. So it's a very confidential thing that they want to talk about. But yes, focus is very, very high. We see investments in Air Force, Navy, Army, NDA across. Border construction
Right.
is the top focus right now. So
Right, sir. The next question, which Mr. Mishra has asked, it is regarding the cryptocurrency, specifically about the 30% tax on the profits. So he
I'm happy with
says, sir, yeah. So he says many people opposing government for putting 30% tax on cryptocurrency. What's your perspective on this? I'm happy with this because by this government ensure people that crypto is legal in India. What's your perspective? So
crypto is still legal in India. There's no confusion on that. How is this ecosystem being governed? Could be a question.
yeah,
But
there was no governance earlier. Yes, no.
Now something has started to come in, like the tax slab, etc. I have been reading articles on crypto where it says non-legal, but now it is legalized because there's a tax on it. That's another statement, right? 30%, why not 20%, 40%? That's a different question altogether. But yes, it is the hard-earned Indian money. The volatility is much, much higher. It's much higher than the derivatives that we have in, that's the reason they put in the higher tax slab.
Right.
Because it's more to do with, what do we call it? Little non-essential activity. So आपके पास अपना index hai, you have your own investment. So people who have higher money, that means they can pay higher tax. So it's a revenue option for the government, which I think is fair. So it's like putting a higher customs duty on imports.
Right.
It's something on the similar line. So my perspective is, yeah, 30% is a good percentage. 40% could also be a good percentage if it makes government earn some money and if Indians have a lot of money to be invested in crypto.
I read somewhere, India is the third largest investor in cryptocurrency. So first is US, then China, and then India. So maybe that is the reason they have to make it legal. The next question is from Ms. Diksha. She says, "Good evening, sir. I am Diksha Gaikwad. I'm from MP. Just want to ask about fiscal federalism a little more."
No, I'm unaware of this term. If you can just probably classify and simplify this a little. Didn't come across this, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
If you can just reclassify it, I'll try and answer. Otherwise, I'll read and get back maybe.
Yeah, so we can do one thing. We can share your email ID in the end, so maybe they can write directly to you. Next question is from Mr. Shishir. He says, "Is the financial year budget
for EV sector?
for
Shishir.
EV sector or not?" Yeah.
Shishir, what do you think? Of course, it's a daunting task to change the entire ecosystem of how we've been driving in India, right? So some initiatives are being taken. So battery has its own supply chain issues. Charging stations, infrastructure setting up is going to be a huge thing. People can say that government should have thought about before launching EV that how it's going to be charged. Most obviously, but believe it or not, EV is the upcoming next thing. We all know it. There's no doubt about it. The battery replacement option is being communicated in the budget. I think more details are yet to come around that, how that's going to happen. So does it mean that I'll have two batteries, one will go in reserve and one I'll operate on, or if I'm able to exchange with my neighbors or friends, I don't know how it's going to work. So more to be read and understood. But yes, it is positive to answer Shishir. Yeah.
Again, one question from Diksha. She says, "What's your perspective on education digitalization? Because there are many where there is not even a basic."
School even, yeah. So but this seems to be a little broken, but education has been a constant, perpetual focus for Indian government, right, for quite some time now.
Right.
And we have a ministry also termed education. So while I agree, but then I think when I talk to people or when I travel a little, I do hear about developments happening in the government schools and etc. And that's what we hear it on television also. But yes, it appears there is a disconnect. That's my perspective. There's a disconnect. Uh, we're talking about laying fibers in the rural areas, right? So forget about education digitalization. So internet will reach when the infrastructure reaches there first. So it's a basic need. I guess it's been a concern so far, and we hope the budget allocation continues to be higher in the coming years as well. So, but a lot of work is being done.
Right.
So that's my perspective.
Right.
Yeah, but Diksha, do clarify on fiscal federalism. What do you mean there? Send me a note or send Bali a note, and we'll see how to address it. Sorry, that was the last question, I guess.
I think so.
So budget is a perspective, so you have to read it,
Right.
and then you see what sense do you make out of it. Right. So
There are a
good
lot
thing
of
is that
which are like, we have to read between the lines.
yeah, that's also important. So there are agencies who give their versions. Media will give their version. Then analyst organizations will give their version. Stock market will give its own version. There are stories. So you have to perpetually, constantly keep reading it. Um, there's this accounting firm called EY, who is our auditor. They also do a
Ernst and Young.
session. They also do a budget session for us, so they'll also give their perspective. But their commentary is lots to do with the taxation piece rather than the future growth that we expect from the budget. Yeah. All right.
Fine, sir. So I think that's all from the questions. Also, let's conclude this session. Do you want to add anything in the end for the students? If you want to add any message, if you want to give any inputs to the students and for the
So,
forthcoming batch.
so the many names that I saw in the list, probably this is the second time they are listening to my little perspective that I have on the budget. I hope when they heard me last and when they hear me today, there is some common connect that they form. And over the last 365 days, they formed some perspective from what they heard last year, and it was relatively easier for them to connect this time. So, because people think that budget is over the head, it's actually not. The more you connect with it, the better it is for you. So just go through that 7-8 page document that's there. And if you have a question, Google, everything is there.
That's it.
All right. That's all.
Thank you so much, sir, for sparing time for this session and enlightening all of us with your, deep knowledge. And on behalf of IIBM family, I would like to wish you great success in all your future endeavors. Thank you so much, students, for attending this session. And we will be coming. We will keep on, planning these kind of sessions for all of you. Till then, we can, conclude this session, and long live IIBM and Jai Hind.
Bye. Thank
Sir.
you, Bali.
Thank you, sir.